So today's selection is Knives Out, 2019 movie written by and directed by Rian Johnson with an incredible ensemble cast. But before we go into the review of the marketing campaign, let's watch the trailer from Lionsgate.
I suspect foul play, and I've eliminated no suspects.
I'm Detective Lieutenant Elliott, and this is Trooper Wagner. We just want to ask a few questions. We understand the night of his demise, the family have gathered to celebrate your father's 85th birthday. How was it, by the way?
The party? Pre my dad's death? Oh, it was great.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to request that you all stay until the investigation is completed.
What?
Can we ask why? Has something changed?
No.
No, it hasn't changed, or no, we can't ask.
I'm gonna live till I die.
You think one of his family
Walls.
killed? Is that what you're suggesting?
Then I cry. I'm gonna take the
You all love twisting the knife into one another. Up your ass.
Oh, very nice.
Matter of fact,
God.
eat shit. How's that? Eat shit. Eat shit. Eat shit.
Smug smile.
Definitely eat shit.
gonna dance, gonna fly. I'll take a chance. I'm high. For my numbers up, I'm gonna fill my cup. I'm gonna live.
You know something. Spill it.
I suspect foul play. I have eliminated no suspects.
I'm gonna live. Until
It's a twisted web. We are not finished untangling it, not yet.
What is this? CSI KFC?
Oh, wow. That's such a good trailer, Pascal. And now, I know you haven't seen this film, so on the basis of just the trailer, before we've even discussed the rest of the marketing campaign, what are your thoughts?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Roger Edwards. And I feel terrible saying this because all the ingredients are there, right? I mean, if you look at the cast, it must have been one of the most expensive movies made in 2019, unless they all went for percentage of the revenue. I'm going to, wait until we've looked at the marketing. But on the basis of this trailer, I can now remember why it's been on the maybe list and probably on the watch list I've got on Amazon or Netflix. I can't remember which streaming service I've got it. And let's continue. But it feels to me as though it's going to be so humorous, potentially, that it could be a distraction. But I'll say no more until we continue the review of the marketing campaign.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a genuinely different style of whodunit. I mean, it's basically going back to the good old-fashioned Agatha Christie style. So you've got a big house, you've got a lot of people in the house, somebody gets killed, everybody's a suspect, everybody has a motive. There's a detective who talks to everybody, and in the end, he gathers everybody together in a room and announces who the murderer is, and twisty. Daniel Craig, you know from the trailer that he's got a bizarre accent, an Southern American accent, which will utterly freak you out as a James Bond fan. But you get used to it, and actually I think that is probably quite good because he could have been too much like James Bond in the film, and I think by giving him this ridiculous Southern American accent, they actually did mark him out as being different. So let's have a look at the marketing campaign then. I mean, I like some of the humour in the campaign, and I like some of the elements. It started off, I mean, it was launched in November 2019. They started talking about it in July, so quite early, and the original poster was really quite simple. It simply had a magnifying glass with a knife as the handle of the magnifying glass as opposed to a proper handle. The word Knives Out, slightly magnified by the magnifying glass, and then just this great big list of some of the stars, not all of the stars, but a great big list of some of the stars. So obviously Daniel Craig, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, Jamie Lee Curtis, Toni Collette, Don Johnson, Michael Shannon, Lakeith Stanfield, Catherine Lang, everybody. It's, as you say, one of the most expensive movies in terms of the number of actors. I love the strapline. Everyone has a motive. No one has a clue. It's good. Again, it sets it up as a whodunit. This is a traditional whodunit. All the tropes are there, as I've already said. Then one of the things that I love about the next set of posters, and we've seen this before with the marketing for Death on the Nile. Obviously, in a whodunit like this, Pascal, you've got loads of characters, hence all of those actors, and each of the characters got their own poster. And the poster showcases the character. For example, Ana de Armas is the carer. Daniel Craig is the detective, but they also showcase part of the house as well. So you've got the character, and then in the background you've got either the library, or you've got the sitting room, or you've got the upstairs loft area, or you've got the office that Christopher Plummer sits in. I absolutely love the color schemes for these posters, and of course they were absolutely littered all over social media, and they used these individual character posters all over social media.
I like that a lot. I mean, the execution is exquisite. I mean, the color palettes throughout, and you can imagine a very lavish interior of the house. But immediately, I am thrown back in time into me playing Cluedo with my siblings, and kind of go, well, who was it? In which room? Which weapon? And already I'm warming to it, because I'm thinking, okay, so this is somebody, or this is a production team that understands the genre and understand, the key elements, and they're not afraid to play them back to you as it will nod to the fans. So, the assumption being that, in a way, the fans of that style of storytelling will know more than the characters themselves.
Yeah. So what I liked about the poster campaign is the first one was just effectively the title with the magnifying glass. Then they did all the individual characters separately. And then finally, in the month before the launch of the film, so this came out in October, was the full Knives Out poster, which actually had all of those things in it. So it has the magnifying glass with the handle as the dagger, and all the cast as well. So I really like the progression of even just the poster campaign. I thought it was really, really quite interesting the way that they did that.
I find the choice of typography and calligraphy, for the title Knives Out, fascinating, because it's not one that I've seen before. And I kind of saw a glimpse of reviews and so on, people saying what is clever about the film is that it's not committing to a particular era. It could be 50s, it could be 60s, it could be 70s. It's all in there somehow. And I think the calligraphy kind of suggests that, because we are a huge fan of the work of Agatha Christie. I probably watched all the Hercule Poirot with David Suchet that, you can get your eyes and ears on. And I feel as though they're playing back to that. Looking at that poster where they are all together, what I think they've done as well, it would seem, is reinforced this element of wit and humor with the strapline hell. Any of them could have done it.
Yes.
Which I think it's back to this idea of clarity of message and clarity of intention with the style and the tone of the movie.
Yeah. So then we move into the trailers. We've already watched the first trailer. Then they followed that up with two more trailers. Now, the second trailer was a lot more fun. It focused much more on the family and all of those individual characters, and it does showcase a number of the humorous moments. Now, it's quite interesting because mainly with trailers, if a film has two or three trailers, they're usually always very much the same, aren't they? They use the same clips, maybe in a slightly different order. They may focus on a different character, whereas this particular second trailer is really quite different to the first one. Yes, there are a couple of scenes that are the same, but it is actually a genuinely different trailer, which I thought was different and made it stand out a bit.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and we and I've spoken about this about right message, right audience, right time. The only example that I can think of where trailers are very different was when we looked at that sci-fi movie. Was it called In Time with
Yes.
Justin Timberlake? You know, where literally we discovered very different forms of storytelling, and to me is exactly what the world of communication is about. So you have the trailer to announce that a movie is coming very soon. I mean, they chose Thanksgiving as well as the date, which I think is interesting, where they're trying to claim, that festive period which is why we have that element of humor and tongue in cheek. But then so let's address maybe the need of a different audience for the different trailer altogether.
Yeah, and then there was a final trailer in the run up in October, and this was much shorter. And this again may be a little bit different. I've not seen before. This focused on the initial reviews, so they actually put the trailer out with comments that the press and other media had made about presumably the audience showings that they do, the research showings, and they used the quotes in that final trailer.
I was looking and reflecting on the date because you and I have reviewed so many movies who've been the casualty of COVID and the lockdowns and so on. And literally, this was released 2 months before, essentially it all began. So it had benefited from the theatrical release, which is, reflecting on the 18 movies that you and I've looked at. It's becoming rare now, not to mention a movie being delayed. Case in point, No Time to Die with Daniel Craig, had been delayed so many times and so on. And for me, looking at the cast in particular, it feels as though it was one of those where the cast would, I've been working very hard on the Bond franchise. In the case of Chris Evans, I've worked very hard on the Marvel franchise. I need something very different.
Yeah.
Both in terms of the character I'm going to literally play, but also in terms of the filming style, the direction of the filming, because this was a quick turnaround for sure.
Yeah. Now, let's move on to the website, Pascal.
Uh-huh.
Or should we say, let's move on to the website that no longer exists. Now, come on, distributors. This film is less than 3 years old, and you've already allowed the website to die. You get the error. The website doesn't exist anymore. And it was, by all accounts, from what I've read, it was a really good interactive website. You've got all of those posters for all of those individual characters. You could click through on each individual character, learn a lot more about them. In fact, we'll talk later about the TV spots, but each character also had a video, and some of the characters even had sub-websites for businesses that they were running. So Tony Colletti's character was running a business called Flam, and there was actually a sub website about that business. And they've let it all go, Pascal. I mean, honestly, that would have been such a good example of good marketing.
We've got to find someone that works in the industry to explain this to us, because we've reported that fact. I get it. If it's a movie from 20 years ago, I have some understanding, although it doesn't cost much nowadays to host a website. But 3 years, particularly with sequels that are pretty much going to be released very soon, that feels like a big mistake.
Now, what I found really interesting about the social media aspect of this film is that they planned the campaign out not only to support the launch of the movie in November, but they'd also planned various iterations of the social media campaign to take them through the awards period.
Okay.
And then to take them into the following year. So we're into 2020 now, and forget COVID and all of that. But obviously the DVD and the Blu-ray came out early in 2020, and the social media campaign morphed over those months to effectively take account of the environment. So obviously, in the run-up to the launch of the film, the Twitter campaign, the Knives Out Twitter feed, was all about the character posters, all about the little videos of each of the characters and teasing the movie itself. But then, after the movie came out, there was almost this sort of... everybody became obsessed with Chris Evans' sweater, his jumper that he was wearing during the film. And what they did around about after the film had been going and we were heading into awards season is they actually changed the Twitter name for a while and made it about Chris Evans' sweater. So they actually created this whole almost iconography around this sweater, and they then started encouraging people to take photographs of themselves wearing a sweater similar to that, and it was even a Knives Out challenge. And this created from the agency. I read the agency's website. 2.8 million impressions and 158,000 engagements as a result of changing that Twitter feed to become about the sweater. And again, as they went into the awards season, so Oscars and BAFTAs and everything like that, they even created some almost like joke posters. And there's one great one which I've got in the notes here, where there is actually a photograph of the sweater sat in a director's chair, and it's saying, "For your consideration, best sweater in a leading role, Knives Out." I mean, that is a little bit wacky, but I really quite like it, and it certainly created that sort of momentum.
I like, I've been saying all along about, platforms and tone of voice and this idea of social media, which is about conversation, but in the context of a brand, Lionsgate and Knives Out and the audience, it's also complicity. And this reminds me, I suppose, we now have the luxury of looking back at 88 movies, as we mentioned, when we began recording this. It reminds me of when we looked at The Shallows.
Yes.
And where the seagull literally became a thing on Twitter. It's always Twitter. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so many people were saying, well, we need to have an Oscar or an award for the Steven Seagal and that kind of things. But what I like about it, because you kindly shared the poster, is back to the effort. It's in line with everything else they've done from July in terms of the typeface, the color choice, and so on. But the humor is just off the charts.
Yeah, and then the social media campaign morphed again. So after the awards series, at the awards season, they then were heading towards the launch of the DVD and the Blu-ray, which was launched around about Valentine's Day in 2020. And again, this is quite innovative, but they recut the trailer of the film to make it more like a romantic comedy. Now, without giving away any of the plot, there is a bit of a relationship between Ana de Armas and Chris Evans in the film, and that's all I'll say. But they recut the trailer to make it look as if it was a rom-com about those two. So again, really quite interesting, but tying into the launch of the film around Valentine's Day. So the social media planning in ahead for this is one of the best I've seen, because they wanted to maintain the momentum way beyond the launch, and they'd already thought about the support for the for the DVDs and the media coming forward. Then there was, again, I said there's a hell of a lot of TV spots. I mean, I decided not to put them all in the notes, Pascal, because they're genuinely interviews with everybody. I mean, that cast is huge. So an interview with each of them. As I said, they each had a little video, not only a poster, a little video. Some of them had their own sub websites. So as I said, Toni Colletti's character was selling flam. Walt was selling Blood Like Wine Publishing, so he got his own website there. Linda is selling a real estate business. She also had a little website. And for goodness sake, why did you take those down? I'm going to say it again. It's so clever that they did this. So there was a massive amount of TV stuff. And the final bit, and again, it was almost like a final trailer. They featured Rian Johnson, the director, but a lot of this trailer is in black and white and filmed almost in a very Alfred Hitchcock style. It has the feel of a 1930s, 40s Hitchcock film.
What was interesting, it was pushed extensively by imdb.com, owned by Amazon, so I suspect that there's a link for you. But it was back to this idea of, it's rare. It's not really done as often as one might think to have the director to be front and center of video. You know, typically it's the actors. Typically, it's kind of fly on the wall, behind the scenes stuff. But the director or the production team is busy at work, and you can get a few words out of them. But that's it. But here, this was a carefully planned, storyboarded, and kind of recorded video. And you're right, there was all the black and white, the scratchiness, and the kind of stains of the old kind of 35mm film, which is back to this idea of. It's maybe a strength of the film where you can't quite pinpoint an era necessarily. And judging by the trailers, I don't think there's any mobile phones to be seen or stuff like that. So I kind of like the idea where they're keeping it quite vague and you can just be immersed into the universe that they've created.
Absolutely. And finally, there was a competition trying to draw all of this content together. So it was called Get Your Cut. And it was announced in September, and there were clues hidden throughout the posters and in the trailers. And the prize was $250,000. And and again, it's genius. They positioned it almost as part of Harlan, Harlan Thrombey, who's the Christopher Plummer character. He was putting this together as part of his legacy, and they even recorded a message from Harlan's personal attorney, played by Frank Oz, of him promoting the idea that you could win part of my fortune. So overall, Pascal, I mean, I've seen the film, you haven't. I really enjoyed the film, but the marketing campaign is true to the style of the film, quite witty, quite innovative, and I particularly just love the way that the social media carried way through and way past the original launch of the film.
I would agree, and back to what you just said, this idea of creating a treasure hunt of sort. I'm already intrigued. I want to go back to the posters now. I mean, I know that the competition is well over, so I have no chance of winning nearly $250,000. But this idea of creating again like a universe within our real world. We've seen that example do you remember when we reviewed 10 Cloverfield Lane?
Yes.
And people could, literally, once they discovered the number 2 and they were ringing the number and there was a recorded message and so on. And this complicity with the audience, it doesn't happen as often as one might think, when you think back of everything we reviewed. And typically the campaign is fair, it share a number of statements, whether they are static images or posters or teaser trailers and so on. The social media is fine, not bad. Whenever there is something little extra, and that, which is what they've done here, it just makes for an overall, better experience. But to your point, though, for that very point, it remains a crime, literally a crime, to not have that website still live today for you and I to review.
That is so disappointing, and by all accounts, it was really clever and very interactive, and they let it go.
My decision, Roger Edwards, is that we shall be watching Knives Out this weekend.
Fantastic.
And the two things that really tipped me over the kind of from maybe 2 years were the character posters. I just I would encourage people to go online and seek them out because they look stunning. And then the other thing was the social media and how they really, really extended the world of Knives Out and this family, and of course the investigation by Benoit Blanc. Although if I had to make a recommendation, perhaps it should have been French or Belgian and not American with a name like this one.
Absolutely right.
Thank you so much for doing the research, and thank you for being such a wonderful co-host, and thank you to you, viewers and listeners, for listening to episode 90 of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. Until the next time, please go out there and make sure your marketing is done right. I was Pascal Fintoni, and here was Roger Edwards.